happening right now on Capitol Hill. The U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, Carl Eikenberry, and General David Petraeus, the top U.S. commander for really the greater Middle East, defending the Afghanistan war plan. I want to take you live inside. You're looking at the chair of this committee, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, John Kerry, giving his opening statements. Hearing obviously just getting underway. General Stanley McChrystal, top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, testified before a House committee yesterday where he gave a strong statement of his support for President Obama's strategy.
The president's decision rapidly resources our strategy, recognizing that the next 18 months will likely be decisive and ultimately enable success. I fully support the president's decision. The president also reiterated how this decision supports our national interests. Rolling back the Taliban is a prerequisite to the ultimate defeat of al-Qaeda. The mission is not only important, it is also achievable. We can and will accomplish this mission.
And now our next guests were both part of that House Armed Forces Committee hearing yesterday, and they are both veterans of the U.S. Armed Services. Congressman Joe Sestak, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. He is running for Senate. And Congressman Duncan Hunter, Republican from California. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Congressman Sestak, I want to start with you. You asked this one question of General Stanley McChrystal, talking in part about Pakistan, which I hear is one issue that some of the senators will really be drilling down on today. Pakistan, but you also asked about benchmarks. What was your reaction to the general's response, and were you satisfied?
It was a good response. For me, and I think for many of us, the real objective here is the destruction of the safe haven of al-Qaeda in Pakistan, which needs the cooperation of the Pakistani army. I asked if we had benchmarks to measure our progress or our failures towards achieving that with the Pakistani army for an exit strategy or to devolve to a different type of strategy. He said they did have criteria and benchmarks, not completely formed, that helped him assess the amount of troops that he needed that had to do something with the Taliban maybe crossing the border. But we had a very classified briefing in the afternoon, focused with the three-star military officer who is there in the area around Pakistan that specifically had to do with that. And so I am content that they are developing these benchmarks, and General McChrystal promised us to have it in a classified hearing in the imminent future.
Okay, so you got your answer. You're saying you're fairly satisfied with that. But Congressman Hunter, I know I read the transcript. You got this question in, basically asking about these enabling, these support personnel when compared to combat troops. And before I get your response on your question, I want you to explain to me who are these enabling or support personnel and why that was so important to ask.
Well, everything from intelligence, drones flying around, hangars, aircraft runways, support helicopters, medevac helicopters, a lot of stuff that we're short on right now in Afghanistan. The whole source of it was, if we're going to send over 30,000 more people over there and we're short now, how do we expect to enable them, because we're actually short now? So how many of these 30,000 people are going to be actual combat troops actually out there in these cities and these urban centers, and how many of them are going to be people who we need now to make things even, because we're short on everything now. IEDs account for 85% of American casualties in Afghanistan. We're losing the IED war now. What are we going to do when we have 30,000 people more driving around Afghanistan? We want to make sure that we have the capability, the enablers to protect those frontline guys, provide support for them so we can be successful. And
so, Congressman, will we have enough?
He seemed confident.
He did.
He seemed confident that he could break that down, because he's able now to micromanage which troops go where. He can actually say to this Marine battalion, I'm going to give you 300 of these guys, and I want you to have 25 engineers along with you. Even though it isn't the usual makeup, he can micromanage that. He can tell them what he wants. He can shape the force now. He was confident in that, and that makes me confident that he feels good about it.
Okay, I want to ask both of you the same question. First, we'll start with Congressman Sestak. And I know when I was talking to Jill Doherty earlier, she said, you know, this idea of winning is a bit nebulous. So I guess they were evading using the word win. But do you think that the U.S. will be successful in its mission in Afghanistan?
That is the right question. Will we be successful? I do believe that this strategy that we are taking advantage of in a closing window of opportunity will be successful. And by that, I mean that we will leave behind an Afghanistan that is inhospitable to al-Qaeda returning. A large probability it will be inhospitable. The key here is Pakistan, and that's why these benchmarks are so important. I do not believe this should be an open-ended commitment. Cost at sometimes becomes larger in any strategy that's not being successful than the benefit. So we need those benchmarks we talked before so we have the proper successful exit strategy or an exit strategy to a different alternative means. But no, I think success has to be defined as the eradication of al-Qaeda that threatens us in Pakistan and an inhospitable to al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And yes, listening to both generals, as you know, Ambassador Eikenberry was the general who asked for more troops 3 years ago and didn't get them, that this is an opportunity for America's security we cannot forsake.
Right, and then he wanted to take a closer look at what he considers perhaps a corrupt government and then determine additional troop levels. Congressman Hunter, what about you? Do you think Pakistan is essential here? I mean, do you think we'll accomplish our mission?
Oh, absolutely. On both counts. Pakistan is essential. That's where the bad guys are going to be hiding for the next 3 months. They're going to be moving out of Afghanistan to Pakistan, storing up weapons and ammo, and getting ready to have a spring offensive next year. You got to make Afghanistan inhospitable. Inhospitable is a fantastic word for that. You got to make it inhospitable to them. You got to make sure that the bad guys can't destabilize Pakistan. That's one more reason to make sure that Afghanistan is inhospitable for the bad guys. Pakistan does have nukes. Got to make sure that it's stable. That makes America safer, and that's what the men and women in the military are over there doing. They're making us safer by being in Afghanistan. That's the ultimate goal, is to not have another 9/11, and that's what we're over there ultimately to do.
Okay, Congressman Hunter, I want to stay with you but move away from Afghanistan for a moment here. You know the story, the 3 Navy SEALs, they've been charged with abusing this Iraqi detainee. I know you sent this letter to Secretary of Defense Robert Gates asking him essentially to review the case. One, what are you asking for specifically from him, and have you gotten any response?
Specifically now, because there weren't any actual charges out there when I sent that letter. The Navy SEALs were arraigned on the 7th. What I want him to do is just look at this case closely, because this has an actual personal bent for me. When I was in the Marine Corps, I went into Fallujah in April of 2004 because of this incident with those Blackwater contractors getting hung up. So these 3 Navy SEALs caught this terrorist mastermind who caused those Blackwater deaths, made the Marines go in. That was me. So this has some personal aspect to it, a personal bent, and to hear that a Navy SEAL allegedly punched a terrorist mastermind in the stomach doesn't upset me, to any great extent. And I think that the Navy's overreacted in this case with charging them.
Real quickly, though, yes or no, have you heard back from the Secretary?
No, I have not.
No, you have not. Okay. Congressman Sestak, know you're running for Senate. You picked up a pretty decent endorsement this week with Congressman Barney Frank. Some people surprised by that. Arlen Specter, your opponent, already has the president's endorsement. So let's talk strategy. Where do you go from here?
Well, as president, I have great respect for President Obama. I'm supporting his strategy, as Arlen Specter is not here in Afghanistan, because I believe it has to do with our security. But as Barney Frank said, he said, look, a deal was cut, and we don't begrudge the president having a deal for political calculation of his 60th vote. But we weren't part of that deal. And Barney Frank says he thinks it's mistaken. We Pennsylvanians have to understand that we have had a senator who has actually switched parties so he could save his job. He couldn't beat the Republican opponent. He has flipped on public option. He's flipped on Defense of Marriage Act. He has flipped on card check. So the question is he standing for his position on Afghanistan out of merit, or is he standing for it because of political convenience to win? The issue I think that both Duncan and I stand for is what you just brought up in your question to him. We both stand for accountability. we both stand that we believe that there has to be a new political leadership where we are accountable. We can differ. But if there's anything the public most is upset about in Washington, D.C., is politicians are in for themselves, not for what's good for them. And that is why I'm running. And ultimately, as you have seen, the polls change dramatically. We will win in Pennsylvania. But thanks for the question. I have great respect for President Obama.
Sure thing. Congressman Duncan Hunter, Congressman Joe Sestak. Gentlemen, thank you so much for chatting. General Stanley McChrystal says he knows how to gain success in Afghanistan. We were just talking about that mission, so